One woman, one microphone. One woman, one microphone. And a multi-million-dollar judicial scandal involving Chief Justice John Roberts. When Jasmine Crockett was told during a Senate hearing to stop suing the system and instead marry someone wealthy, she didn't flinch. She exposed the financial network behind the Supreme Court and turned a personal insult into a national reckoning. But here's the real question. What happens when a woman refuses to choose marriage over justice and brings the entire system into the light? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The Senate hearing room was packed wall to wall, the air thick with anticipation and quiet hostility. Rows of suits lined the seats like armor. Cameras pointed like loaded weapons. And in the middle of it all stood Jasmine Crockett, calm, poised, unapologetically present. She adjusted the microphone without ceremony. No greetings, no smiles, just a voice smooth as steel. "We are not here to ask for favors," she began, locking eyes with the front row. "We are here to demand fairness for every black child who was told they weren't gifted enough, for every Latina student who was redirected out of opportunity and into silence." A slide flashed behind her. Charts, receipts, federal data spanning a decade. "This isn't bureaucracy gone wrong," she said, her tone tightening like a fist. "This is strategy. It's policy engineered to exclude, cloaked in neutral language and executed with surgical precision." She paced slowly, deliberately. You don't need a conspiracy when the structure itself is doing the job. Some in the chamber looked down, ashamed, or pretending to be. Others narrowed their eyes, bristling not at her word but at her nerve. She quoted emails from administrators referring to students of color as statistical noise. She referenced how funding for talent enrichment programs increased everywhere except in communities of color. "Your data says my people aren't gifted," she said, raising her voice just one notch. "But your system was never designed to recognize our brilliance." Then came a beat of silence. No rebuttal, no interjection, just air stretching, tightening. That's when John Roberts shifted. The Chief Justice leaned forward with slow, theatrical grace. He wore his black robe like a crown, his voice calm and measured, designed to sound wise, designed to sound harmless. "Ms. Crockett," he said, lips curled into a faint smile. "This is clearly very important to you, and while passion is admirable, may I offer some advice?" He didn't wait for permission. "Rather than exhaust yourself in hopeless litigation, you might consider marrying someone wealthy. Life tends to be easier that way." The words landed like a slap across a silent room. Audible gasps snapped through the rows. One aide dropped a pen. Another senator turned sharply, stunned, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She stood still, her breath steady, her hands relaxed at her sides. Only her eyes changed, sharp, cold, calculating. She didn't respond. Not yet. She let the weight of his words hang there like smoke, poisonous and lingering. Let the world hear it roar. And she made a promise in silence. "You will regret that sentence." The insult didn't break her. It sharpened her. Jasmine walked out of that Senate hearing not defeated but transformed. Her heels struck the marble floor like war drums. She no longer carried a legal case. She carried a mission. She didn't say a word to the cameras waiting outside, only gave them a look. "You heard him. Now watch me." That night, long after the media frenzy had cooled and her staff had gone home, she sat in a quiet, cramped office above a shuttered bookstore in D.C., a place with flickering lights and old that creaked with every shift in weight. But it was hers. Across from her sat Lena Torres, once an elite SEC investigator, now a freelance forensic analyst and Jasmine's closest ally since their days grinding through law school on scholarships and late-night coffee. Lena leaned back, arms crossed, her voice dry but razor-sharp. "You really want to go after Roberts?" Jasmine didn't flinch. "I want to pull the curtain back. If it's just one man, I'll expose a network that made him untouchable." By 2 a.m., they were deep into the digital trenches. Lena's laptop hummed low as lines of code and registry data scrolled faster than the eye could track. They weren't looking for his name. They were looking for patterns. And they found them. Obscure LLCs based in Delaware, then re-registered in the Caimans. Names like Pine Echo Investments, J Frontier Holdings, and Silver Grove Capital started to repeat, sometimes with slight misspellings, sometimes as ghost entries that link back to nothing. Until they did. Lega traced beneficiary IDs through tangled webs of offshore proxies. Jasmine followed the money, and at the center of the web was a name that brought the room to a standstill: Gavin Roberts. Publicly, a consultant with no clear employment history. Privately, the listed owner or silent partner in over 7 entities with direct holdings in international real estate, energy stocks, and defense contracts. Total assets, $34 million. Jasmine blinked twice, not from surprise but from focus. This wasn't a smoking gun. This was a barrel still hot from firing. Then came the most damning layer: the timing. Jasmine layered the dates of these acquisitions against key Supreme Court rulings. There was one in 2018. Roberts wrote the majority opinion to ease restrictions on international investment shielding. 2 weeks later, Gavin Roberts' name appeared on a Cayman property trust worth $6.8 million. Another in 2020. The court declined to hear a case involving SEC oversight expansion. 1 month later, Silver Grove Capital purchased shares in 2 companies that would have been directly affected. This wasn't just shady. It was orchestrated. Jasmine stood back from the whiteboard now covered in arrows, bank codes, shipping logs, and court dates. Her throat tightened. This isn't just a corrupt man. This is a blueprint for elite immunity. Suddenly, Lega's burner phone buzzed. A single message, encrypted, no sender ID. Just 9 words. "I have what you need. Meet me in person." Attached with a location, an underground garage beneath the federal annex. Jasmine didn't hesitate. 40 minutes later, under flickering fluorescent lights, she met a man no older than 30. Hoodie up, hands trembling. "I work in the clerk's office," he said quickly, eyes darting around. "They think no one reads the internal logs, but I read everything." From his backpack, he slid out a thick envelope bound in twine. Jasmine opened it carefully, and her heart thudded. It wasn't just financials. It was court scheduling memos, redacted deliberation drafts, and internal emails marked Chief's direction. It showed that Roberts had directly interfered in how cases were assigned, removing or delaying those that might harm corporate donors linked to his family's holdings. Jasmine turned to the last page. It was stamped confidential, requires CJ approval. His initials were there. Junior. She looked up at the clock. "Why give this to me?" His hands shook. "Because I watched that hearing. Because no one else has the guts to fight him. But you didn't even flinch. That's how I knew you're not afraid." Then he walked off into the shadows, leaving Jasmine alone under the buzzing lights, envelope clutched to her chest. It was real now. No more doubt. No more guessing. This wasn't just about winning a case. This was about tearing the whole damn thing down. She had the evidence, the names, the timing, and the motive. But before she could take one step forward, the machine she was about to expose turned its full weight against her. It didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves, calculated, cruel, and relentless. Before the sun rose, headlines were spinning across networks like a coordinated strike. Not against her case, not against her facts, but against her. Her name was twisted into clickbait. Single, loud, and dangerous, one segment teased. Does Jasmine Crockett want justice or just attention? Cable news panels gathered not to discuss her findings, but to dissect her identity like it was a flaw. The word unmarried appeared more often than the word lawyer. A talking head in a crisp Navy suit smirked and said, "This feels more like a tantrum than a legal fight." Another chimed in, "She seems very angry for someone who hasn't been wronged personally." And then it turned uglier. A viral post mocked her as the woman no man wanted, now trying to destroy the men in power. It racked up 1 million likes in 12 hours. Satirical pages Photoshop her into bridal gown with captions like "Save the Court, Marry Jasmine." Even major opinion writers joined in. One column read, "A woman without family is a dangerous thing. Crockett proves it." She was no longer being treated as a lawyer. She was being reduced to a caricature, emotional, bitter, unlovable. And all because she dared to question the untouchable. Her inbox flooded with messages, some condescending, others violent. "Go make a family and leave the law to the men," one email read. "You're embarrassing your race." Another said, sent by someone hiding behind a fake name in an American flag profile photo. Outside her office, the backlash took form. Protesters gathered with hand-painted signs. Crockett can't keep a man, so she's suing one. Injustice over marriage? More like jealousy. A woman screamed through a megaphone that Jasmine was a disgrace to decent women everywhere. Her staff tried to hold the line, but fear started to creep in. Reporters camped outside the building, hungry for a reaction. Camera crews tried to catch her at home, shouting questions about her love life. Some asked why she hated men. Others asked when she finally settled down. She ignored them all, but each comment chipped away at the humanity of the fight she was in. The story had become personal on purpose. They wanted the world to believe she wasn't stable, wasn't credible, wasn't even likable. Because if they could make the world question her, maybe the world would forget to question him. But Jasmine knew exactly what this was. This wasn't a smear campaign. It was a warning, a message to every other woman watching. This is what happens when you rise too high, speak too loud, or dig too deep. It was never about her evidence. It was about putting her back in her place. They couldn't disprove her, so they tried to erase her. And still, she didn't stop. She watched every headline. She read every cruel post. And then she printed them. She taped them to the wall beside her whiteboard, right next to the flowchart of shell companies and court memos. Because one thing Jasmine understood better than anyone else: the louder they tried to shut you up, the closer you were to the truth. They tried to erase her with headlines, humiliate her with sound bites, bury her under laughter and lies. But Jasmine didn't flinch, didn't hide. She answered them the only way she knew how, with truth under the brightest lights, on her own terms. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m., but by 9:15, the building was surrounded. Reporters from every major outlet packed into the narrow briefing room shoulder to shoulder, their voices low, their cameras trained like weapons on the podium. No one knew exactly what Jasmine Crockett was going to say, but everyone knew it would matter. The room dimmed, and a massive screen lit up behind the stage. Without preamble, a video began to play. The clip, that clip, the one they all remembered. Chief Justice John Roberts sitting at the Senate hearing, his voice smooth, dismissive, and surgical. Rather than engage in hopeless litigation, you might consider marrying someone wealthy. Life tends to be easier that way. The audio echoed in the room like a gunshot. Then silence. The screen went black. No title. No comment. Just silence. Jasmine walked out slowly and deliberately, dressed in a simple black suit. No earrings. No smile. She walked like someone who had been dragged through fire and had come out sharper. She stood behind the podium, looked out at the sea of cameras and microphones, and waited. The room was still. Her voice, when it came, was low and even, but every word was a weight. That sentence, she said, wasn't a joke. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a mirror. She let that hang for a moment. It reflects a system that doesn't just tolerate arrogance. It protects it, rewards it, builds entire institutions around it. Her eyes scanned the crowd, locking onto faces. I wasn't just insulted as a woman. I was spoken to like someone who doesn't belong in the room, like someone who should sit down, shut up, and smile politely while the men decide what justice looks like. Her voice grew stronger, steadier. But I didn't sit down. I didn't shut up. And now they want to make it personal. They want to call me bitter, angry, dangerous. She paused, then nodded slowly. Fine, let's make it personal. I am angry. I am furious. Furious that the highest court in this country is being used as a vault to lock away truth. Furious that a man trusted with protecting justice uses that power to protect his own interests. The screen behind her changed. Charts, names, transactions. A timeline connecting offshore accounts, family members, and key rulings from the Supreme Court. This isn't just about me. It never was. This is about every person who's been told they don't matter because they weren't born into the right name or skin or bank account. Her tone didn't rise, but her words hit harder with each sentence. When the Chief Justice of the United States tells a woman to marry money instead of seek justice, that's not ego. That's culture. That's tradition. That's a structure designed to survive by keeping women in their place. She stepped aside from the podium for a second, letting the evidence speak on the screen behind her. One slide read simply, "Power is not threatened by lies. It is threatened by truth that speaks too clearly." She returned to the MIC. This isn't about revenge. This is about reckoning. Because if he can say that to me on camera, imagine what he's doing off camera. Imagine who else has been told to stay quiet. Imagine who never got the chance to speak at all. Jasmine ended with no flourish, no speechwriter's closing line. Just truth. I was told to marry rich and live easier. But I chose to fight. I chose to expose. I chose to believe that justice, real justice, doesn't come from a last name or a tax bracket or a title. It comes from the people bold enough to hold the system accountable, no matter the cost. She stepped back from the podium. The room was silent, stunned, for a long moment. Not a single question was asked because there was nothing left to say. The truth had been spoken, the evidence shown. But in a system built to protect itself, Jasmine knew the next response wouldn't be reflection or reform. It would be punishment, and it would come fast. The lawsuit hit the news cycle like a bullet, filed just hours after Jasmine's press conference. It accused her of defamation, unauthorized disclosure of judicial documents, and deliberate damage to the integrity of the judiciary. The language was technical, but the message was clear. Sit down or be destroyed. Major media outlets ran the story within minutes. Chief Justice sues Jasmine Crockett for libel. Supreme Court faces chaos as personal feud erupts. Some anchors read the charges with barely concealed satisfaction, spinning it as Roberts finally defending the dignity of the court. Jasmine read the document once, silently, then laid it on her desk like it was nothing more than a blueprint for a trap. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. She just muttered, "They're going to try and erase me." Lena, standing nearby, already had her laptop open. Then we give them something they can't delete. Within the hour, their office turned into a war room. Jasmine was calm, focused, her hands steady, her voice low but direct. No one touches the originals. We make copies. We make backups of the backups. Lena rerouted their servers through encrypted international nodes. Jasmine pulled hard drive from a lock safe, each one labeled in black marker, financials, case logs, correspondence, anonymous testimonies. She laid them out on the table like weapons. We give it all to people who can't be silenced. Their target, an international transparency watchdog based in The Hague, an organization known for publishing state secrets, whistleblower leaks, and documents no court in the world could legally touch. As Jasmine prepared the data packet, she spoke slowly. They think if they sue me, the story dies. Let's make it immortal. By midnight, the full archive had been securely uploaded. Thousands of pages, recordings, audit trails, names, dates, rulings, and Roberts's fingerprints all over them. It was now housed in 3 mirrored servers in different countries outside U.S. jurisdiction. The watchdog team confirmed receipt with a single line. Verified. We'll begin global distribution by sunrise. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, staring at the monitor. Her heart was racing, but her face showed nothing. She knew what was coming. Court orders, subpoenas, public attacks, maybe worse. But the truth was no longer hers to protect. It belonged to the world now. Outside, news crews circled like vultures. Leaks from Roberts's camp claimed he was seeking an emergency injunction, calling her release of data an act of institutional sabotage. The word treason even slipped into one news chyron. Jasmine's phone lit up with messages, some hateful, some terrified, some thanking her in whispered gratitude. But one from an anonymous number simply read, "They won't stop. Be ready." She looked out the window into the quiet dark of the city, then turned to Lena and said, "They can try to bury me under lawsuits, but they can't bury the truth. Not this time." She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was defending every voice that had ever been silenced, every story that had been edited out, every truth that had died in darkness. And now that the light was on, she dared them to try and shut it off. They sued to silence her, threatened to bury her under legal firepower. But Jasmine didn't retreat. She walked straight into the lion's den, not as a victim, but as her own weapon. The hearing room wasn't just formal. It was built to intimidate. Dark wood, high ceilings, the echo of every footstep stretching like a warning. Senators sat behind curved mahogany desks, raised above the floor, looking down at whoever dared to speak. Jasmine Crockett stood alone at the center, not flanked by lawyers or surrounded by advisors. Just her, a single MIC, and a folder of truth clutched in her hands. Across from her was a legal team representing Chief Justice Roberts, polished, expensive, silent for now but loaded with questions waiting to strike. The room was packed, journalists, staffers, federal officials, even retired judges watching from the back. But the energy was off, tense, controlled, like a room full of people waiting for a bomb to go off and unsure whether to run or pretend they didn't hear the ticking. Jasmine didn't stall. She raised her chin and began, her voice calm but cutting. I know exactly why I'm here. Not because I lied, but because I didn't stay quiet. A senator cleared his throat, leaning forward. Ms. Crockett, are you admitting you sent confidential materials to foreign entities? Jasmine nodded once. I sent evidence of corruption to those who wouldn't bury it. That's not treason. That's responsibility. Another voice jumped in, this time sharper. Do you consider yourself above the law? Jasmine didn't blink. No, I consider myself equal to it, which is more than I can say for the man you're defending. Gasps weren't loud, but they were real. The room shifted. She could feel the weight of every camera pointed at her, every eye trying to measure whether she was brilliant or reckless or both. Then Roberts's lead counsel stood, his tone smooth, practiced. Ms. Crockett, you've accused the Chief Justice of this nation of manipulating court cases for personal gain. Yet you provided no chain of custody, no verified authentication for those documents. Jasmine stepped forward slightly. The chain of custody is your panic. The verification is every ruling you've already made that lines up with the money. Behind her, a screen came to life. It showed a timeline. On one side, key Supreme Court decisions. On the other, financial transactions connected to Roberts's relatives. Jasmine moved through them one by one. March 4th, 2018, Roberts votes in favor of rolling back offshore transparency rules. March 17th, Gavin Roberts purchases $6.8 million in real estate in the Caimans. August 2nd, 2020, court declines to hear SEC expansion case. August 30th, Silver Grove Capital increases holdings in deregulated firms. Her voice never rose. She didn't need volume. She had proof. These aren't coincidences. They are patterns. And if you won't see them, it's because you've chosen not to. One senator leaned back, arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable. Another scribbled something fast on a yellow notepad. The courtroom wasn't angry anymore. It was afraid. Then came the personal attacks disguised as questions. What makes you think you're qualified to make these judgments? You've never held a federal position. Jasmine met his gaze. Maybe that's why I'm not afraid to tell the truth. Another asked about her political affiliations, whether she had ambitions beyond this. She smiled, just once. I'm not here to run for office. I'm here to make sure no one like him runs this system unchecked again. Then Roberts's attorney tried the last tactic, make it emotional. He said she seemed driven by resentment, by bitterness. You're making this too personal, he said softly. Jasmine's jaw tensed. She let the silence build for 2 full seconds before responding. What you call personal, I call lived experience. What you call bitterness, I call memory. And what you call dangerous, that's just what power calls a woman who knows exactly what she's doing. The final slide on the screen was a list, dozens of names. Whistleblowers who'd been discredited. Women who'd been silenced. Civil cases dismissed quietly, hidden in bureaucratic dead ends. This isn't about me, Jasmine said. This is about everyone who's ever been told to keep quiet because a man on the other side wore a robe or a badge or a title that made him untouchable. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't break. And when she finished, the room didn't applaud. It couldn't, because she hadn't come for applause. She had come for truth. And now that it was out, every person in that room had to ask themselves a question more terrifying than guilt. What if she's right? The room was heavy with silence, not from lack of word, but from the weight of everything just spoken. And then Jasmine said the one thing no one could ignore, the line that didn't just hit back. It hit history. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her voice was steady, her posture still, her eyes locked onto the faces of the men who had tried to define her worth by what she wasn't, A wife, a mother, a follower. The air in the chamber was so still it felt like glass ready to crack. Jasmine stepped slightly forward, her tone razor-sharp but calm, and said, "You told me I should marry someone rich to make life easier." Her words dropped into the silence like a match into dry grass. "But I didn't come here for easy. I came here for right." There was no dramatic pause, just a rhythm of truth landing blow after blow. "You didn't just mock me," she said. "You mocked every woman who ever said no to being silent. You mocked the ones who walked into boardrooms alone, who studied late while everyone else slept, who ran for office without a ring on their hand." Her hands were open at her sides, not clenching fists, but every word she spoke struck harder than any punch could. You mocked every girl who grew up knowing she'd have to be twice as good just to be taken half as seriously, and still showed up. Her voice tightened, not because she was breaking, but because the moment demanded more than volume. It demanded everything she had lived. "You didn't insult me because I wasn't married. You insulted me because I refused to be manageable, because I chose purpose over permission, because I didn't wait for someone else's last name to matter." A senator looked away. Another tapped a pen nervously. Jasmine kept going. "You don't fear what I've said. You fear that others are finally listening. That I'm not the exception. I'm the start." She took a breath, not to collect herself, but to give them time to feel the discomfort they had earned. "So no," she said, more quietly now but no less clear. "I didn't marry rich. I married truth. I married responsibility. I married justice. And I will not apologize for that." And in that moment, the room didn't just hear her. They felt her. Every camera in the room zoomed in. Every journalist froze. And then, slowly, phones began to buzz in pockets. A whisper turned into a ripple, and a ripple into a roar. Across social media, her words exploded into fire. Justice over marriage appeared on screens, in captions, in headlines. Young women posted it under selfies with graduation caps, protest signs, and court documents. Older women posted it with stories of everything they had given up to be taken seriously. It wasn't just trending. It was erupting. A movement wasn't born that day. It had been growing in silence for decades. Jasmine had simply given it a name. Outside the building, a crowd had gathered. Some came with signs. Others just stood and listened, hands over hearts, tears in their eyes, not because they pitied her, because they recognized her. In her voice, they heard years of being overlooked. In her words, they saw themselves. And inside that hearing chamber, where power was supposed to stay untouchable, Jasmine Crockett had done something almost no one else could. She cracked it open, word by word, until the truth poured out. Her words had gone viral. Her truth had torn through the walls of power. But as the nation echoed her voice, the system she'd exposed began to show cracks. And so did the cost of speaking out. The Judiciary Committee released a statement with no ceremony, no emotion, just black text on a white background posted to an official government website. Chief Justice John Roberts is to be placed on administrative leave pending a formal ethics investigation into alleged misconduct and judicial interference. 21 words. That was it. But those words hit harder than any headline. They broke something open. Within minutes, phones were ringing across Capitol Hill. Staffers were whispering in corridors. News anchors stumbled over their teleprompters, unsure how to report what had never happened before. The man who once ruled the highest court in the country without question was suddenly suspended. Power, once absolute, had been paused, if only temporarily. The politicians who had once dodged microphones now lined up in front of them. Some claimed they had always been concerned. Others said, "It's time for accountability." Jasmine watched all of it with tired eyes. She knew what this was, not integrity, self-preservation. They weren't leading. They were following the movement she'd forced into existence. Her name trended for the fourth day in a row. Justice over marriage was now more than a hashtag. It was a rallying cry, a protest chant, a slogan printed on posters and stitched into T-shirts. Everywhere she turned, there was her face, on magazine covers, in op-eds, on protest banners held by teenage girls and grandmothers alike. She was being called a hero, a truth-teller, a revolutionary. But Jasmine didn't feel like any of those things. She felt like a person who hadn't slept in 3 nights. A person who couldn't drink coffee anymore because it made her hands shake too much. A person who had to move apartments twice in 1 week because someone had followed her home. The threats weren't vague anymore. They had names, dates, street corners. Her team hired private security, but even that didn't stop the sick feeling in her stomach every time a car slowed near a building or a stranger looked at her too long. People praised her courage on national television, but no one saw what it looked like behind closed doors. No one saw her pacing her apartment at 2 a.m., checking the locks again. No one saw the stack of hate mail she kept in a shoebox, too stubborn to throw it out, too angry to forget. Every compliment felt like a spotlight and a target. Every message of support came with the unspoken burden of being someone's symbol, someone's reason to believe. She smiled when cameras were on. She answered every question clearly. But sometimes, when she was alone, she whispered to herself just to remind herself she still had a voice. And yet, through all of it, she never once said she regretted it. Because somewhere deep inside, past the exhaustion, past the fear, was a quiet, steady fire of knowing they had tried to silence her, and they had failed. She had exposed the truth, and now the world couldn't unsee it. The world now knew her name, but Jasmine never wanted fame. What she wanted, what she had fought for through every threat, every sleepless night, was something far more dangerous to the system. Real, irreversible change. It began not with a celebration, but with a document, dry, clinical, stamped by a federal court in bold black ink. The motion is granted. The case of Crockett versus Department of Education shall proceed to full trial. It was one sentence, one decision, but it cracked open a wall that had stood for generations. The lawsuit, once considered a long shot, had been greenlit by the federal bench, legitimized, vindicated. Jasmine read the ruling in her office with the blinds half drawn and her phone silenced. Outside, the street was already filling with cameras and supporters. Inside, she let the words settle into her bones. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to sit back and breathe. They had tried to break her. They had tried to erase her. Instead, she'd written herself into the very structure of justice they tried to keep her out of. The lawsuit wasn't just about paperwork. It was about people, thousands of children, most of them Black or Latino, who had been quietly excluded from accelerated programs, gifted curriculums, scholarship pathways, masked under neutral policies. Now that exclusion would face legal scrutiny under federal civil rights law. Within weeks of the decision, state education departments across the country began reviewing their policies, quietly at first, then more publicly as pressure mounted. Schools issued statements. Superintendents formed equity review task forces. Old data sets reappeared, showing just how far the system had pushed certain students to the margins. In Baltimore, a young girl named Amina was readmitted to a gifted STEM track she'd been removed from the previous year. In Houston, a scholarship that had quietly excluded ESL students was opened back up. In Detroit, a principal resigned after internal emails showed deliberate testing suppression for black students. Jasmine didn't need credit. She just wanted that door open. And it was finally swinging wide. Still, the calls came. Political operatives reached out with veiled offers. You should run, one advisor said. The people love you. A senator publicly floated her name as a future candidate for Congress. Media outlets began building narratives. Crockett 2028 and From Courtroom to Capitol. The idea of power chased her like a shadow she didn't ask for. But Jasmine never flinched. When asked about the rumors, she answered simply, I'm not interested in trading one kind of power for another. I'm not here to be elected. I'm here to hold the elected accountable. Her refusal confused some, frustrated others. She didn't play by the rules they knew. She had already won something bigger than office. She had changed the rules entirely, and that made her even more dangerous. Her image was everywhere, on magazine covers, on murals, in classrooms where a story was being taught in real time. Journalists begged for features. A documentary crew pitched them miniseries, but Jasmine turned them down one by one. She had no interest in becoming a brand, no interest in having her pain packaged for headlines. She told a reporter once, I didn't survive this so someone could sell my story. I survived so others wouldn't have to live it. She stopped giving televised interviews. She declined speaking tours. She gave her spotlight back to the people still stuck in the shadows. In a private meeting with a group of young law students, she told them, "I'm not a symbol. I'm a worker. Symbols sit on pedestals. Workers keep their heads down and get things done." One of them cried. Jasmine just nodded and said, "Then you understand." But even as she tried to retreat, the movement didn't slow down. What she started had outgrown her. Justice over marriage became more than a slogan. It became a political litmus test. Protesters in other cases held signs quoting her speeches. Students used her testimony in mock trials. A teacher in North Carolina wrote an entire curriculum around her case. A foundation was created in her name. She didn't start it, and she didn't endorse it, but it funded legal aid for families facing discrimination in